Nicole has really been a presenter in higher education technology, for years, and she's quoted through a large number of publications. Prior to joining Oracle, she served as the research analyst at Ovum, and she spent really the last decade advising institutions globally on cloud migration, modernization, and emerging technologies with the student experience. Right now, she's Vice President of Higher Education Development at Oracle. She's responsible for really engaging with the industry ecosystem and developing thought leadership and the best practices within cloud technologies that she's now going to um, pipe into and fold into Oracle's higher education solutions, including its student cloud product suite. So without any further introduction, I will turn this over to Nicole. Welcome, Nicole, and the floor is yours.
Awesome. Thanks, John. I am delighted to really talk today about kind of swinging wide the campus gates. It is a mission and a dream that has guided really the entirety of my career, and could not be, I think, more important than it is today. So we're going to talk today for the next 20 minutes about how we swing wide the campus gates to more students and really address the affordability crisis that our industry faces. But we're going to swing wide the gates, but we're first going to start actually with a window. And I'm going to ask kind of the question today is whether kind of Kingdom's kind of quote unquote policy window kind of has opened. And we now have this kind of unique opportunity to kind of move through that window and create a new model to financial aid. Kind of has COVID-19 kind of throw open the sash, almost like kind of Santa is coming to town. But we have known for kind of many years, decades even, that there is an almost a fault line in higher education. Kind of the gap between kind of what we kind of consider kind of the estimated family contribution with the kind of actual affordability that students and their families kind of face. Certainly Caitlin Zaloom in her book, Indebted, talks at great length, kind of explores at great length the level of risk, financial risk that students and their families are willing to take on because of that gap between what our financial aid policy says that they can afford and what they actually can afford is now massive, really deferring retirement, kind of changing their kind of financial landscape. And they're doing these things certainly because they know, and we all know, that higher education is how you punch your ticket to a middle-class life. And what parent doesn't want that ticket punched for their children? But the challenge, or kind of the rub in this, is that the policies that we use, while well-intentioned at the time, were created in a very different world, kind of a very different society, kind of one where it was a kind of nuclear family with a single income that was often a salaried kind of income. That they don't take into consideration kind of the modern financial landscape, where the financial complexities of the family are kind of far more complicated than they were in the past, have kind of far more demands kind of on them in terms of housing prices, in terms of healthcare costs, in terms of commuting costs. I mean, the list is kind of endless. We could just kind of turn to our own kind of family kitchens to talk about the things we talk about. And certainly the cost of attendance is built around an assumption that the student is a dependent and doesn't bring with them kind of the independent costs of childcare, of not working, those opportunity costs. And this creates tremendous anxiety for students and their families. And they come into our system, which is ironically kind of structured kind of more like healthcare or kind of gas, the Department of Motor Vehicles, instead of a kind of trusted advisor model that it should have. I mean, you can see this most clearly in maybe the first, if not the second question a student will ask. And I saw this day in and day out when I was a director of admissions. The first question a student and his or her family will ask is, can I afford this? Or how do I afford this education? And we will answer that question last. We will answer questions about residential life, about terms abroad, about faculty engagement, about social opportunities, about career development. We'll answer all of these questions 1,000 different ways before we ask the question that's causing the most anxiety and the most worry for students and our families is, can they afford this education? And once we do answer that question, we kind of blizzard them with paperwork, creating a scenario where it is more about kind of forensic accounting than it is about kind of advising our students. And we see the outcome or the reality or the impact of this kind of healthcare or DMV type approach to financial aid. 18,000, that's 18,000, not 1,800 or 18, but 18,000 students at Houston Community College don't complete the verification process. And that's 50% of kind of the students who are in fact selected for verification. Now we know students don't enroll or don't complete verification for a myriad of reasons, but kind of the most major one, and we know this kind of in our gut, kind of in our soul, that it's about the challenges kind of that paperwork. There is a documentary called Personal Statement, and it kind of tracks the experience of 3 New York City public school students as they research colleges, apply, and ultimately enroll. And one of these students whom I've had the pleasure of meeting is Enoch Jamot. And he said in an editorial in the New York Times, we are asked to do more because we have less. And that's what happens to our students during the verification kind of process. And COVID-19 has kind of thrown rocket fuel kind of on all this. I wish I could take that for my own, but that was Paul LeBlanc from Southern New Hampshire that actually said that first in an Inside Higher Education webinar kind of earlier this year. But there's an intensification of that fault line that we're seeing in financial aid. I mean, FAFSA completions are down 16.1%. A NASPA survey found that 59% of participating institutions have seen a major increase in professional judgment requests. And shoot, the jobs report says that it's going to take kind of at the current kind of rate of employment growth, 29 months until we're back to kind of last February. So this is not something that is going to go away kind of anytime soon. So we know the fault line kind of was there, and we know that it's only going to get kind of worse kind of in the coming kind of years, months and years kind of ahead. But we've known this because our existing ways of kind of managing financial aid have been working a little less well kind of each year. Year by year, the returns have been not as good. And I mean, almost quite nostalgically, kind of this past February, we probably were agonizing over a demographic cliff. Yet COVID-19, that rocket fuel, is going to make that demographic cliff kind of far worse than we ever imagined. If we know kind of the students, that demographic or that population that will grow kind of post kind of 2025, these are the students who are kind of more likely to be poor, more likely to be less familiar with kind of navigating the complexities of applying for financial aid, getting a package, and ultimately kind of graduating. And these students are the ones who have been kind of most hard hit, not just by the health crisis, but by the subsequent financial crisis as well. So we may, in fact, be looking at a demographic cliff that is quote unquote the big one kind of for our industry. And we have been attacking this kind of demographic shift While the cliff happens kind of 2025, the shift has been kind of a slow moving kind of transformation. We have been attacking it with, a box of Band-Aids, to be honest. I mean, the kind of most popular, well, one of the more popular Band-Aids, of course, is tuition discounting. But kind of have we gotten to kind of a place where tuition discounting is unmanageable, that it now starts to present kind of fiscal instability for our institutions, or kind of the inability to really predict and manage kind of the revenue of our institutions. And I don't necessarily even want to talk about kind of the kind of equity and social justice ramifications of who in fact is getting institutional aid under some of these tuition discounting kind of models. And the other kind of Band-Aid we've used, of course, is the international kind of student recruitment. Don't get me wrong. I believe that international students being a vibrancy and a worldview to our campus is absolutely invaluable. But the kind of brass tacks of it is these international students also bring full cash payment of tuition and kind of different types of auxiliary fees. But the bottom has fallen out of that market. My goodness, 43% fewer first-time international students on our campuses this year. I mean, this kind of all arrows now point. And if you ignore this at your kind of own institution's kind of peril, kind of point to the requirement, the demand, the strident demand that we address the underlying affordability crisis that's almost structural kind of in our approach to financial aid. So this is where Kingdom's window actually opens. So feel the breeze. It is blowing in through that window, that we must in fact kind of build back better. If we want to have kind of ultimately that tailwind as we rebuild our kind of economy, and perhaps even more importantly, kind of the structure and shape of our society, we need to get to a place where we don't have a generation of students carrying 1.6 trillion in student debt, and we don't have to kind of throw up the same chart recession after recession, where we see the most hard hit students, the most hard hit individuals in our society are the ones with the least access to higher education. We can do more and we can do better. And COVID opens the window to kind of build this new approach, because we know the current model doesn't scale, it doesn't perform, doesn't deliver the returns, and we can no longer kind of sustain it. Our students have a level of need from our institution. This is not just the financial need, it's the social, emotional, and developmental kind of needs to kind of get them through a process and kind of drive them to kind of across the stage, not just through the gates. And certainly we know the regulatory demands, while likely to shift, certainly in the coming years, particularly in the next year, in all likelihood, but the fiscal realities of our institutions that drove the tuition discounting, that is not a short-term, medium. It is a long-term problem, because it is a structural kind of gap in our industry. So how? Kind of what is this first step in kind of building back better? The first thing I would offer is that we need to move the financial aid office from the back office to the front office. The last question that we answer needs to be the first question that we answer. And we need to answer that question not just in our office on campus, but in the guidance counselor's office, and in the church basement, and in the Department of Labor office, and the community center, and kind of even on the playground if needs be. And we need to do it not just during that recruitment and enrollment phase, but we need to have the supports in place for financial aid kind of at every step in the student journey, from the course selection to identifying a major, to the million small choices that lead up to a grade, to kind of career choices as well, so that we help our students kind of make the right choices before they make the wrong ones. Now, in order to do that, and that's a kind of a big, huge ask of moving financial aid from back office to front office, is we need to clear the space and find the resources to outpace kind of this new reality. And that is going to mean being ruthless, absolutely ruthless about what makes the boat kind of go faster, which makes financial aid go faster and makes it more agile kind of in that water. And without question, that means kind of preparing our financial aid professionals with the skills and the resources and the capabilities to move that boat faster and more kind of agile kind of in the water. So how do we do this? I know the grand ideas, and I know this whole conference is really kind of driven towards kind of thought leadership. They're inspiring, but where the rubber meets the road, kind of where the kind of dream becomes the reality, where things have they fork in the road, whether they'll fail or they'll succeed, comes in the execution. And so how do we build that financial aid office that scales and performs and is ultimately sustainable kind of over generations? Now, of course, there's a big Oracle O in the bottom of my kind of visual here right now. So there's shocker. I'm gonna suggest that technology is part of this story, part of this the how. But I'm going to kind of flip that kind of a bit, because I think the time for kind of bolt-on shiny toys that support or address a specific transaction or a specific process or a specific small corner of the institution, that time is past. The scale of our affordability crisis requires us to look far deeper and far more broadly, to look at this as a system problem. So we need to look at our technology at the system level, kind of looking at the underlying capabilities almost from a horizontal perspective. And the first that I would recommend kind of on this is that automation is something that we need to kind of pull through. And I mean automation in terms of kind of the machine as a persona in our financial aid processes, even business processes across the institution. Now, not Hal, who is very scary, or certainly the Terminator, although I think kind of Arnold in the financial aid office would be kind of great fun. But what I'm talking about here is kind of the benevolent, the computer in the Star Trek kind of series. I mean, this computer kind of enabled the humans to cast aside kind of those commodity transactions, the monotony of daily life, the things that kind of kept them from focusing on kind of higher order activities, the higher arts, to kind of actualize themselves kind of as individuals. And so we need to kind of bring in the machine to our financial aid kind of processes to take care of those commodity transactions, to free our financial aid counselors to support the entirety of the student life cycle, wherever our students might be. Now that will, I mean, don't kid yourself. It will require us re-engineering business processes and reimagining the work of the financial aid professional. And that means, without question, kind of reskilling. The second area is about promoting kind of student agency. Now, typically, we don't talk about technology as much in student agency and the kind of student development kind of literature, but kind of knowledge, information, insight, and the ability to act on that knowledge and information are characteristics or hallmarks of student agency. And technology can surface those capabilities, can help break down the black box of financial aid, kind of dispel the alchemy, replace the alchemy with science, and provide kind of powerful self-service tools so they can make those right decisions and take those right actions before they make the wrong ones, before they don't kind of make the satisfactory kind of academic progress, or they kind of go beyond kind of the time limit for their financial aid. And then the last one is about bringing the virtual engagement into the business as usual. We've had a million Zoom meetings, Google Meets, virtual assistants, chatbots, even basic interactive knowledge bases to kind of help kind of meet students where they are during this health crisis. But that's just the physical aspect of it. There's an emotional and social one, and these tools kind of bring down the barriers for students. They're less intimidating. They're more possible for kind of students with kind of multiple and competing priorities. Anthony Abraham Jack, in his book, The Privileged Poor, does a real in-depth treatment kind of this issue, and these virtual engagement and business tools and bringing them into the business as usual can kind of help us kind of swing wide the campus gates to kind of more students. Now, kind of a bit, last few bits of kind of thoughts kind of for the road, though none of us sadly are kind of on the road kind of these days. And it might be blasphemy for me to say this. And I do hope that I'm going to look over at my desk drawer, my Oracle badge is not now on fire or self-destructing kind of as we speak, as I'm about to say this. But the automation, that machinist persona, or the analytics, the insight tools, the predictive analytics, the self-service tools, the chat bots, the virtual assistants, the video conferencing. This is not actually kind of the financial aid office of the future. It's not, none of these things kind of on their own are going to swing wide our campus gates. The renaissance, the building of this new financial aid office, this will be fueled by the people. And so we need to kind of find the space for them to go on that journey. And there are three kind of points to this. The first is we have to support them in the journey to grapple with discerning between what needs to be done versus how it needs to be done. We focus often far too much on the how and not enough on the what. And as a result, I mean, that's the core of change management, kind of, right? But we need to support our financial aid professionals kind of in that journey. Part of that will be finding a new table, kind of the proverbial table, a bigger table, and one that can accommodate different kinds of seats. In too many of these kind of transformation journeys, particularly in higher education in the financial aid office, it is either the technology office, those folks are at the table, or the financial aid end users, or leadership from the business office, or leadership from academic advising. But we don't have all these folks kind of at the table. And if we're going to meet students where they are at every step in that life cycle, in order to swing wide our campus gates, we all need to have kind of a seat at that table and construct kind of this new vision. But it will be hard. This will require these folks to relearn and redo and create their new vision for what this financial aid office of the future is. And I think we don't consider carefully enough that we have our own staff looking at those campus gates and wanting to swing them wide, kind of open, but are more fearful that those gates are going to crush them as they make that attempt. So we have to give them the resource and the emotional and the safe space in order to feel empowered, to swing those gates kind of open and kind of enable kind of a new generation of students to kind of pile through and create a new and better world. Thank you. John, I see you there in the corner. So I think I am straight to time.
Yes, indeed. That was a really interesting presentation. What I loved was how you're really focusing on what the student needs and what the community needs, rather than let's go automate our manual processes in some shiny way, so that basically you go back, when you do that without focusing on the student need, you're going and doing what Matt always talks about is just repaving what you've already done.
Absolutely.
We've got several questions in the QA. Kieran asks, students need to be presented with prospective financial aid models along with course information, and can this help student enrollments? And why is there a gap in providing this information upfront to student, and it only starts after the application process?
That is, Kieran, that is the heart of the problem. And I'll admit, kind of firms like Oracle have contributed to it, is that kind of the financial aid kind of information and transactions and interactions sit over here, kind of in our systems, and our kind of enrollment and course taking and program development kind of sit over here, and they are kind of owned and guarded by different places in the technology stack and by different stakeholders within the institution. And so as a result, the student has to be the glue between these two areas. And how many students, if you were to survey 15 students out there, 100 students out there today, know anything about satisfactory academic progress? I know lots of adults in higher education that don't know about satisfactory academic process. And so we need to bring financial aid and academics together so that we can help more students take the right courses in the right order so that they can have the best both financial outcome and academic outcome as a result of the time on our campuses.
That's great. And Preeti Tanwar also asks, you talk about she really is very enthusiastic about your point of moving things from the back office to the front office,
Mhm.
and that then there will be reskilling involved as some of this is automated and some of the stuff, the people who are in the back office doing all the paper shuffling now they can be redeployed. Where are some of the areas, financial aid people have got a wide range of understanding of how a university operates and what's important. Where do you recommend those reskillings happen in financial aid? Where are they most effectively redeployed?
Yeah, it's a huge question, and a critical one. I don't think, first off, we can underestimate the 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 softer skills that have to be, I don't want to say kind of folks need to be trained on, but they need to be almost reminded or kind of refreshed or allowed to return to, because most financial aid counselors got into the business because they wanted to help students, not because they wanted to become experts in federal financial aid policy and regulations. Not that there is anything absolutely kind of wrong with that. We absolutely need folks to be expert kind of in that. But you can't simply ask someone who has been in charge of kind of owning verification in a financial aid office or managing kind of counselors who are working on that, saying, okay, now I'd like you to go out and meet with displaced workers at the Department of Labor and help them fill out kind of forms and talk them through how they might put together a program of study. That's a huge chasm for an individual to kind of leap towards. And so we have to put into place the supports and the training and the kind of safe space and resources to enable them to do that.